What I'm about to tell you will shock and terrify anyone who owns a home in America right now, but it needs to be said because the financial catastrophe heading toward homeowners is unlike anything we've seen since the Great Depression. Approximately 40 million American homeowners are about to lose everything they've worked their entire lives to build, and most of them have no idea what's coming. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't fear-mongering. This is mathematical certainty based on converging economic forces that are already in motion and accelerating toward a collision that will destroy the largest source of wealth for middle-class Americans. The homeownership crisis of 2026 will make 2008 look like a minor market correction because the underlying problems are much larger and the tools for fighting them are much more limited. I've been analyzing real estate markets for over 4 decades. I've seen boom and bust cycles, foreclosure waves, and market crashes. But I've never seen a setup quite like what we're facing now, where multiple catastrophic forces are converging simultaneously to create a perfect storm that will devastate homeowners across every income level and geographic region. The 40 million homeowners who will be destroyed by this crisis aren't just subprime borrowers or people who made obviously risky financial decisions. They're teachers, nurses, engineers, small business owners, retirees, and other responsible people who followed conventional financial wisdom about home ownership and are now trapped in situations they never saw coming. If you own a home, if you're thinking about buying a home, or if your financial future depends on real estate values, you need to subscribe to this channel right now and pay attention to every word I'm about to share, because understanding what's coming and positioning yourself correctly could be the difference between financial survival and complete financial destruction. Let me start by explaining the mathematical reality that makes this crisis inevitable. The convergence of unaffordable mortgage rates, inflated property values, economic recession, and demographic shifts has created a situation where tens of millions of homeowners will be forced to sell their properties at exactly the time when there aren't enough qualified buyers to absorb that inventory at current prices. The first factor driving this crisis is interest rate shock that has made homeownership unaffordable for the vast majority of Americans while simultaneously destroying the equity positions of existing homeowners. When mortgage rates were 2 and 3%, people could afford much higher property prices because their monthly payments were manageable. But with rates now above 7% and likely to stay elevated, the affordability equation has completely broken down. Here's the mathematical reality that most homeowners don't understand. A home that cost $600,000 with a 3% mortgage required monthly payments of about $2,500. The same home with a 7% mortgage requires monthly payments of almost $4,000. That's a 60% increase in monthly costs for the exact same property. This payment shock has already priced out millions of potential buyers who could have afforded homes at previous interest rates but can't qualify for mortgages at current rates. The pool of qualified buyers has shrunk dramatically while the number of homes for sale continues increasing as economic stress forces more homeowners to sell. The second factor is negative equity traps that will force millions of homeowners into financial decisions that destroy their wealth. Negative equity occurs when you owe more on your mortgage than your home is worth, which is already happening to homeowners who bought properties at peak prices in 2021 and 2022 using minimal down payments. As property values decline to reflect the new interest rate reality, more homeowners will find themselves underwater on their mortgages. When you combine negative equity with economic stress that forces people to relocate for jobs or reduces their ability to make mortgage payments, you create situations where people must sell homes at losses they can't afford to take. The negative equity problem is particularly severe for recent home buyers who used FHA loans with minimal down payments, interest-only mortgages, or other low equity financing options that were popular when rates were low. These borrowers have virtually no equity cushion to absorb property value declines, which means even modest price drops push them underwater immediately. The third factor is the adjustable rate mortgage time bomb that will explode over the next 18 months. Millions of homeowners took advantage of low introductory rates on adjustable rate mortgages that are now resetting to much higher rates based on current market conditions. These payment increases are forcing homeowners to choose between bankruptcy and foreclosure. Unlike the 2008 crisis, where subprime borrowers were the primary victims, today's ARM reset crisis is affecting borrowers across all income levels who thought they were being conservative by choosing adjustable rate products with attractive initial terms. Many of these borrowers qualified for their original loans based on the introductory rates, not the reset rates they're now facing. The payment increases from ARM resets are often 50 to 100% higher than the original payments, which makes them unaffordable for borrowers who were already stretched to qualify for the original loan amounts. When combined with broader economic stress and inflation that has increased all other living costs, these payment shocks are creating immediate foreclosure pressures. The fourth factor is regional economic collapse in areas that became dependent on industries that are now failing or relocating. Technology companies that drove home price increases in cities like San Francisco, Austin, and Seattle are laying off workers and closing offices. Financial services companies are reducing their footprints. Government contractors are facing budget cuts. Manufacturing is moving overseas or to lower-cost regions. When local economies collapse, they create downward spirals where job losses lead to foreclosures, which depress property values, which reduce local tax revenues, which forces cuts to public services, which makes areas less attractive and accelerates population outflows. Once these cycles begin, they're extremely difficult to stop before they destroy most of the wealth in affected communities. The geographic concentration of economic activity in a few expensive metropolitan areas means that when those areas face economic stress, the impact on homeowners is concentrated and severe. Unlike previous economic downturns that affected different regions at different times, the current crisis is hitting multiple expensive markets simultaneously. The fifth factor is demographic collapse that's reducing demand for housing in precisely the markets where prices increased the most during the pandemic bubble. Birth rates have fallen to record lows, which means fewer young adults are entering their prime home buying years. Immigration has slowed dramatically. Internal migration patterns are shifting away from expensive coastal markets toward lower-cost inland areas. The demographic math is particularly devastating for expensive markets that depend on attracting young, high-income workers to sustain property values. When those workers stop coming or start leaving for lower-cost alternatives, the entire economic foundation of those markets collapses, taking property values and homeowner wealth with it. The sixth factor is the commercial real estate collapse that's spreading to residential markets through interconnected financial effects. Office buildings, retail centers, and hotels are losing value rapidly due to remote work, e-commerce growth, and reduced business travel. The banks that finance these properties are facing massive losses that constrain their ability to lend for residential real estate. Regional banks are particularly vulnerable because they have high concentrations of commercial real estate loans that are defaulting at accelerating rates. As these banks face capital constraints and regulatory pressure, they're reducing residential lending, which eliminates financing options for potential homebuyers and creates forced selling pressure for homeowners who need to refinance. The interconnection between commercial and residential real estate markets means that the commercial collapse will continue spreading to residential markets through reduced lending availability, bank failures, and general economic stress that affects employment and income levels for potential homebuyers. Now let me show you exactly which homeowners are most vulnerable to this crisis and when the devastation will accelerate, because understanding the timeline and risk factors could help you determine whether you're in the danger zone and what actions you need to take immediately to protect yourself. The first group of homeowners who will be destroyed are those who bought properties in 2021 and 2022 at peak prices using minimal down payments or exotic financing. These buyers include approximately 8 million first-time homeowners who used FHA loans with 3.5% down payments, VA loans with 0 down payments, or conventional loans with 5 to 10% down payments. These recent buyers have virtually no equity cushion to absorb property value declines. With home prices falling 10 to 20% in many markets already and much larger declines coming, these homeowners are either underwater on their mortgages now or will be within the next 6 months. When you combine negative equity with economic stress that might force relocation or income loss, these homeowners face impossible financial choices. The mathematical reality is stark. Someone who bought a $600,000 home in 2022 with 5% down payment now owes approximately $570,000 on their mortgage. If that home's value has declined to $500,000, they're already $70,000 underwater. If they need to sell, they must come up with $70,000 in cash plus selling costs, which most of these buyers simply don't have. The second vulnerable group consists of approximately 12 million homeowners with adjustable rate mortgages that reset between now and late 2025. These borrowers thought they were being smart by taking advantage of historically low introductory rates, but they're now facing payment increases that range from 50 to 150%, depending on their specific loan terms. The ARM reset schedule is heavily concentrated in the next 18 months because most of these loans were originated in 2020 and 2021 when rates were at historic lows. The borrowers include professionals, small business owners, and other seemingly financially stable people who qualified for large loan amounts based on the low introductory payments. Many of these ARM borrowers are discovering that they can't refinance into fixed-rate mortgages because they no longer qualify at current interest rates and property values. The combination of higher rates, stricter lending standards, and reduced property values has made refinancing impossible for millions of borrowers who are trapped in loans with escalating payments they can't afford. The third group facing destruction includes approximately 10 million homeowners in markets where local economies are collapsing due to industry consolidation or relocation. Technology hubs like San Francisco Bay Area, Austin, and Seattle are experiencing mass layoffs and office closures that are destroying the economic foundation these housing markets depend on. These markets saw property values increase by 100 to 200% during the pandemic as remote work policies allowed technology workers to bid up housing prices using inflated salaries. Now that companies are cutting costs and eliminating remote work positions, these markets are losing both population and income support simultaneously. The reversal is particularly brutal because these markets have extremely high housing costs that require very high incomes to sustain. When the high-paying jobs disappear, there aren't enough lower-income buyers to absorb the housing inventory at any price that allows existing homeowners to recover their investments. The fourth vulnerable group consists of approximately 7 million retirees and near retirees who thought they were financially secure but are now facing the choice between losing their homes and destroying their retirement savings. Many of these homeowners bought their properties decades ago and saw enormous paper gains during the housing bubble, but they're now discovering that those gains are evaporating. Retirees are particularly vulnerable because they typically live on fixed incomes that don't adjust for inflation or changed economic conditions. When property taxes increase, insurance costs skyrocket, and maintenance expenses rise due to inflation, retirees often can't afford to maintain their properties without depleting retirement savings that were never intended to cover housing cost increases. Many retirees also borrowed against their home equity during the bubble years to fund lifestyle expenses or help adult children with their own real estate purchases. These home equity loans and lines of credit now require payments that many retirees can't afford on fixed incomes, especially as property values decline and eliminate the equity that originally supported those loans. The fifth group includes approximately 3 million small business owners who use their homes as collateral for business loans or who depend on real estate-related businesses for their incomes. These homeowners face the double impact of business failure and residential real estate collapse simultaneously. Real estate agents, mortgage brokers, home inspectors, contractors, and other professionals who depend on housing market activity are seeing their incomes collapse as transaction volumes decline and property values fall. Many of these professionals borrowed against their homes during the good years to fund business expansion or personal expenses, and they're now trapped between failing businesses and over-leveraged properties. Small business owners in other industries who pledge their homes as collateral for business loans face foreclosure if their businesses fail, regardless of their personal ability to make mortgage payments. The interconnection between business and personal finances means that these homeowners can lose everything, even if they haven't made any obvious mistakes with their personal financial management. The timeline for this crisis is accelerating faster than most people realize. We're currently in what I call the recognition phase, where individual homeowners are beginning to understand their personal situations, but haven't yet created the collective selling pressure that will crash the market. This phase typically lasts 6 to 12 months as people exhaust their financial resources trying to avoid foreclosure. The next phase will be the capitulation phase, which I expect to begin in late 2025 and accelerate through 2026. This is when forced selling becomes overwhelming as homeowners run out of options and banks begin aggressive foreclosure actions. Property values will decline rapidly as distressed inventory floods the market while qualified buyer pools continue shrinking. The final phase will be the consolidation phase, probably beginning in 2027, when institutional investors and cash buyers acquire distressed properties at deeply discounted prices. This phase typically lasts several years and represents the transfer of home ownership from individual families to institutional landlords and investors. The geographic concentration of this crisis will be most severe in markets that experienced the largest price increases during the pandemic bubble. California, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Florida, and parts of the Northeast will see the most dramatic property value declines and the highest foreclosure rates. But even markets that didn't experience bubble conditions will be affected because the crisis will spread through financial system interconnections, economic confidence effects, and migration patterns as people flee distressed markets for more affordable regions. The government response to this crisis will be limited and largely ineffective because the scale of the problem exceeds the capacity of existing safety net programs. Mortgage modification programs helped some homeowners during the 2008 crisis, but they won't be adequate for a crisis that affects 40 million homeowners simultaneously across all income levels. Federal and state governments are already facing severe fiscal constraints due to inflation, demographic pressures, and existing debt obligations. They simply don't have the resources to bail out 40 million homeowners without creating currency debasement that would make the underlying affordability problems even worse. The banking industry will also be severely stressed by this crisis because residential real estate represents the largest asset category on most bank balance sheets. Regional banks are particularly vulnerable because they have high concentrations of local real estate exposure and limited geographic diversification. Bank failures will accelerate the homeowner crisis by eliminating financing options for potential buyers while creating credit contractions that spread economic stress to other sectors. The feedback loop between real estate values and banking system stability will amplify the crisis beyond what pure supply and demand fundamentals would suggest. Now let me tell you exactly how to protect yourself from this homeowner apocalypse, because while 40 million Americans are going to lose everything, the minority who understand what's coming and take decisive action can not only survive, but actually profit from the wealth transfer that's about to occur. The first and most important step is conducting an honest assessment of your current situation to determine whether you're in the danger zone or if you have time to reposition yourself safely. This requires brutal honesty about your finances, local market conditions, and personal circumstances that most homeowners are unwilling to confront. If you bought your home in 2021 or 2022 with less than 20% down payment, if you have an adjustable rate mortgage that resets in the next 2 years, if you live in a market that depends on industries facing layoffs, or if you've borrowed against your home equity for any reason, you are in immediate danger and need to act within the next 6 months. For homeowners in immediate danger, the harsh reality is that selling now, even at a loss, might be your best option. I know this goes against every emotional attachment you have to your home and every piece of conventional wisdom about real estate being a long-term investment. But conventional wisdom assumes normal market conditions, and what's coming is anything but normal. Calculate exactly what it would cost you to sell your home today, including real estate commissions, closing costs, and any amount you'd need to bring to closing to pay off your mortgage. Compare that one-time loss to the potential losses you'll face if you wait and property values decline another 20 to 40% over the next 2 years. If you can survive the immediate loss of selling now, that painful decision could save you from financial destruction later. The key insight is that real estate losses during systemic crashes often exceed what individuals can absorb financially, turning temporary paper losses into permanent life-changing devastation. For homeowners who aren't in immediate danger, the strategy is different but equally important. You need to build financial flexibility and reduce your exposure to real estate concentration risk while positioning yourself to benefit from the opportunities this crisis will create. Start by ensuring you have fixed-rate financing that locks in your housing costs regardless of future interest rate changes. If you currently have adjustable-rate mortgages or home equity lines of credit, refinance into fixed-rate products immediately, even if it costs you slightly higher rates in the short term. Build substantial cash reserves beyond normal emergency fund recommendations. During housing market crashes, opportunities arise quickly for cash buyers who can close transactions without financing contingencies. Having 6 to 12 months of living expenses plus investment capital in liquid form positions you to take advantage of distressed property sales. Reduce your overall exposure to real estate by avoiding the temptation to buy investment properties or larger homes while the market appears to be declining. Many people try to catch falling knives by purchasing properties they think are attractively priced, only to discover that prices continue falling far below their purchase levels. Instead of increasing real estate exposure, diversify your wealth into assets that will hold their value during the housing collapse. High-quality dividend-paying stocks, Treasury inflation-protected securities, precious metals, and international investments all provide alternatives to real estate concentration risk. For potential home buyers who are currently renting, this crisis will create the buying opportunity of a lifetime, but only if you prepare correctly and time your entry properly. The key is building substantial cash reserves while waiting for true distress pricing to emerge. Don't try to catch the falling market too early. Real estate crashes unfold over years, not months, and prices typically fall much further than most people expect. Wait for genuine distress selling when homeowners are forced to accept any offer rather than testing the market to see what they can get. The best opportunities will emerge during the capitulation phase, when foreclosure inventory floods the market and desperate sellers compete for scarce qualified buyers. Properties that seem expensive today will be available at 50 to 70% discounts during peak distress periods. But success in distressed market buying requires more than just having cash available. You need to understand which locations and property types will recover quickly versus those that might remain depressed for decades. Focus on areas with strong employment bases that don't depend on bubble industries. Avoid markets where populations are declining, where local economies depend on single industries facing structural challenges, or where property taxes and regulations make ownership costs unsustainable relative to local income levels. These markets might not recover even after the initial crisis passes. The most sophisticated homeowner protection strategy involves repositioning yourself to benefit from the crisis while minimizing your exposure to its negative effects. This means becoming a cash buyer of distressed properties while reducing or eliminating your exposure to owned real estate that could decline in value. Consider selling your current home if you have substantial equity and can relocate to a rental property temporarily. This converts illiquid real estate equity into liquid cash that can be deployed more strategically when opportunities arise. The psychological difficulty of this strategy prevents most people from considering it, which is exactly why it can be so profitable. Geographic arbitrage becomes critically important during housing market collapses. Markets that avoid the worst effects of the crisis, typically lower-cost areas with diversified economies and conservative lending practices, often see population inflows as people flee distressed markets. Position yourself in these recovery markets rather than hoping distressed markets will bounce back quickly. The wealth transfer aspect of this crisis will be enormous, and understanding how to position yourself on the receiving end of that transfer could set up your family financially for generations. Every major real estate crisis creates opportunities for prepared investors to acquire quality properties at prices that seem impossible during normal market conditions. But participating in this wealth transfer requires capital, knowledge, and emotional discipline that most people don't possess. You need substantial cash reserves to buy properties without financing. You need expertise to identify which properties will recover value quickly. And you need the emotional strength to buy when everyone else is panicking and selling. The institutional investors who benefit most from real estate crashes start preparing years in advance by building cash reserves, developing acquisition systems, and positioning themselves to act quickly when opportunities arise. Individual investors can use similar strategies on smaller scales if they start preparing now. Real estate investment trusts that focus on distressed property acquisition often provide ways for individual investors to participate in institutional strategies without requiring direct property ownership. But choose these REITs carefully, focusing on those with strong balance sheets and experienced management teams that have successfully navigated previous real estate cycles. The tax implications of the homeowner crisis will be significant and often misunderstood. Foreclosure and short sale transactions can create taxable income through debt forgiveness that many homeowners aren't prepared for. Understanding these tax consequences before they occur allows you to plan appropriately and avoid additional financial stress. The psychological preparation for this crisis might be the most important element because the scale of wealth destruction will overwhelm most people's ability to make rational decisions. When your neighbors are losing their homes and your local economy is collapsing, maintaining clear thinking and strategic focus becomes extremely difficult. But this crisis, like all major market dislocations, will eventually end and create new opportunities for those who maintain their perspective and financial capabilities. The people who emerge from this period financially stronger will be those who saw it coming and positioned themselves correctly rather than those who hoped it wouldn't happen. Here's what you must do immediately to begin protecting yourself from this crisis. First, complete an honest assessment of your vulnerability based on the risk factors I've outlined. Don't assume you're safe just because you're current on your mortgage or because your local market hasn't declined yet. Second, if you're in immediate danger, begin the process of evaluating exit strategies, including selling your home before conditions deteriorate further. This might be painful, but it could save you from complete financial destruction. Third, if you're not in immediate danger, begin building the financial flexibility and cash reserves you'll need to survive the crisis while positioning yourself for opportunities. This means reducing non-essential spending and avoiding new financial commitments that would constrain your options. If this analysis has convinced you that a homeowner crisis of unprecedented scale is approaching, share this video with anyone who owns real estate or is considering buying property. Subscribe to this channel for updates as this crisis unfolds and strategies for navigating the opportunities it will create. Leave a comment below and let me know whether you think you're in the danger zone and what steps you're taking to protect yourself. The community of people who understand what's coming needs to support each other through the challenging period ahead. Remember, real estate crashes are wealth transfer events where unprepared homeowners lose everything while prepared investors acquire generational wealth at discounted prices. The choice of which side of this transfer you end up on depends on the decisions you make right now before the crisis accelerates beyond the point where protective action becomes possible.